She's going to bring that by. If you could please fill out that feedback form, very beneficial for the KOVA events moving forward. So we'd love if you would be able to fill that out and hand them back in. Also, the air conditioning. I know people were running outside and warming up a little bit. There's nothing that can be done about the air conditioning here in this facility, and they keep it cool for a reason. And you know, one and the other. It's a beautiful facility, and thank you. It is a beautiful facility, but just a little bit chilly. So if you got a jacket in the car, grab it. Great information coming up, and our next presenter, Jennifer Baldwin. Jen Baldwin comes to us from the 177th Fighter Wing. She has been the Director of Psychological Health since 2019. Prior to that appointment, Jen was the first outpatient substance use disorder social worker for the Wilmington VA Medical Center. And we miss Jen, but we still work very closely with Jen. She was a clinical licensed social worker with the Wilmington VA for over 10 years and has worked in social service since 1999. Jen's foundational work in trauma and addictions has created a passion to finding the starting point of where invisible injuries occur. Jen's going to talk to us about airmen and family resiliency, the 177th Fighter Wing, and she's going to talk about families. She's also going to talk about, I think a little bit of her own life is injected in when she speaks. She is the wife of a veteran, the mother of a veteran, so she's going to come up right now and welcome Jennifer Baldwin. I have your click. Right? Left.
Oh, there we go. Wonderful. Hello and good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. If you can hear me, everyone can hear me all right? We're good? Yeah, sound check. Great. I don't have such a pleasing voice as Jax does, so I'll just take it the best I can. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate the time to speak. And I'll do my best as possible to make sure you have a better understanding of the Air National Guard and what we do down in South Jersey. How many of you know about the base down in South Jersey? Oh, fantastic. So many times we were forgotten about. So often I end up seeing that people are like, oh, there's a base down there? And I'm like, yes, we're the ones responsible for making all that noise. Those are our fighter jets. So just a little bit about the psychological health program, which is the program that I am a part of. We're actually part of a law. That's the reason why there are people like me at the 54 air bases throughout the globe. So right now we have, I think, 90 of us. We're all in some varied form of social worker, so whether or not LMSW, a DSW, or an LCSW like myself. We do have a mission specifically to help improve and address members and their functioning, psychological functioning related to their experiences within the Guard. We do our best to help their families as well. So moving through. There is the DOTI that kind of specifically speaks to what our responsibilities are. And as you can see by the picture behind me, our members, when they came back from deployment this year, this was from our AEF, so that's the Air Expeditionary Force. We did have a deployment to Bagram. We actually were the last fighter wing unit to leave Afghanistan Air Base. So very appropriate that the Jersey Devils were leaving Afghanistan last. One of the bigger things that I do at the base is I help my commander, Colonel Rout, Colonel Brown, and Colonel Dunn, our senior leadership, with helping to understand the mental health readiness of our unit. One of the bigger takeaways is we, as a unit, have had many opportunities within the last 2.5 years to not just act internationally, right, OCONUS. We've done a lot of CONUS missions as well. So we actually haven't come off mission yet. We still have airmen deployed around the state at various veterans' homes, helping and assisting our veterans with their care. So it's important to understand that not only do we have a state responsibility or state mission, we have a federal mission too. So we have two bosses, essentially. With that understanding, one of the bigger issues that comes from our members is knowing that they have responsibility to their community-wide, as well as also the local community as well. So the bigger understanding to take away, ultimately, if you are looking at employability for Air Guard or Air National Guard members, is there's something to be said about a person that wants to dedicate their time, whether it is as a drill status guardsman or as a technician, as a state employee, or as an AGR, which is our Air Guard Reserve. We have 7 different statuses within the Air Guard. So any individual coming to work with us can be at any point, depending on what their status is, which actually helps to guide us, specifically for my office, about the services that they're eligible for. So at a joint base, say for instance, Joint Base has a whole MTF, so a military treatment facility. Not everybody is eligible for care at the MTF, only those who are on activated orders. So for a person who's a drill status guardsman who might be experiencing some symptoms that could be specific towards a mental health disorder, that person may not be eligible to attend services within the MTF. That doesn't mean that they're not eligible for services outside, which is one of the things that I help to facilitate and make sure that they get access to. And it is a priority. So let's delve into the deployment cycle. So many of you have probably already had this better understanding of what happens during deployment, right? One of the bigger things to understand is the pre and the post issues. And oftentimes with my office, as well as also our Airman and Family Program Manager, we deal with lots of family issues. So when a person's getting ready to deploy, you would be surprised at how many things come up that, for us, our deployment cycles vary. So we have we're on an 18-month cycle for our AEF, or RCP is every 2 years. RCP is Reserve Component Package. So, and our AEF is all of our maintainers. The unique thing is that with people leaving, and I'll be honest, this last deployment was really difficult simply because of everything that was going on in the world at the time. And we came right from having statewide mission. Some of our members actually had also come back, had actually left to go down to the insurgency issues down in DC during our deployment, because this time last year was when everything was literally hitting the wall. So our members were really working hard at trying to address that. Their families also not necessarily having great contact with them because of all the things that were happening at the time in Afghanistan. The difficulty was for them knowing, well, what's going on with my member? What's happening with my people? I don't know, I can't get in contact with them. So when someone comes through a PDF line, which is our pre-deployment, I can't remember what F stands for, so our pre-deployment fulfillment, they get information that helps them understand all the things that go with it. So they're handed a red folder. That red folder basically has the whole lifeline of how to contact everyone at the base that they may need to. Just realized I didn't click my clicker. And I can guarantee that probably about 3/4 of the people that deployed during our AAF cycle last year were first-time deployers. First-time deployers going to Afghanistan to shut down the bag room. It was a lot. It was a heck of a lot, not just for the members, but for their family as well, because although they did have access, and don't get me wrong, this is a whole different story than even 10 years ago when people had access as far as phone calls and emails and social media and text messages. This changed simply because we didn't have the access, because as soon as things started changing rapidly in Afghanistan, the responsibilities and the mission changed dramatically too. So I can tell you for sure there were issues that were taking place, that we had members talking to family and all of a sudden shouting, I have to go, with gunfire in the background. That's not what's been happening in the last 10 years. So for people who, if that was not their first time in their cycle going out, this was the first time that they had this experience occur. And it created a huge shift in focus with what was going on and the concerns that were being expressed. So that whole during deployment really elevated concerns for a lot of our family members in regards to how do I deal with this? I haven't heard from them in 5 days. Is everything okay? Being a focal point for these families and giving them an opportunity. And what we did was actually created a Google Meet so that they could actually talk to one another and be seen virtually, because we weren't able to bring them onto the base. We were still at an elevated point in regards to COVID. So having that Google Meet actually created an opportunity for people to build connection, which created a greater chance for people to have better understanding of what was really going on. In talking about the post-deployment, and as you saw earlier with the pictures of the kids grabbing by their family members, when individuals came off, the big bird coming in literally flew down right into our backyard, and everybody exiting off, masks on, and it was just a larger group of our maintainers that came home. We still had some steadily dealing with issues overseas. That first period where someone can grab a hold of their airmen and hug them and kiss them and touch them and know that they're there and just be grateful that they're safe is a wonderful and amazing time. 2 weeks later, probably not so much, right? So if we're talking about the opportunity for people to address that cycle of learning to create new changes and try to adapt, one of the bigger pictures there to take away from is the changes in that loss. So we've adjusted, right? We've been away, you've been gone. Most AAF is usually 3 months. We were 5.5, which is unusual. And it was because of all the changes that were going and occurring rapidly. So for our members to really be seen, be able to touch and see one another as far as like their loved ones, it really was wonderful. But again, the issues with after the post reunification and that 2-week period of the honeymoon phase, and then going back to the reality of, oh gosh, they're still here. Like when are you going out again? Was real, but it was also kind of difficult because knowing they didn't want them to go, but still adjusting to the fact of having them home and what that might look like now, because things have changed, right? The way that we have been dealing with everything on this side of the world, COVID-wise, but it's also in regards to what their airmen were dealing with overseas and what they saw. So trying to address and deal with all that in that process. And so if we talk about the idea of the mental health effects of those that are within the military, and recognizing that ultimately we can't prepare for everything. We do all that we can to try to help our members understand what they may be exposed to, what they may be struggling with, and trying to reduce the stigma related to those mental health conditions has been a huge part of what my office tries to instill throughout our unit. Knowing that being in a combat exposure space, right, creates a greater chance that there may possibly be significant mental health conditions coming out of that. The other piece that people don't really recognize is the occupational, right? So operational PTSD. So because this is your occupation, you're getting trained every day to deal with potential combat issues. You don't necessarily are going to have the same reaction as someone who has actually experienced combat, but you're preparing for it, right? So every day, so our AGRs, they are, every day they report to work, and they're either an AM or a PM cycle, Air Guard Reserve. They are Title 32. Full-timers in uniform, reporting for duty every day. They show up. They are usually, most of them are part of our maintaining package. So their crew chiefs, their age, their weapons, ammo, avionics, electronics, anything that has to do with the jet, they're a part of that. So we also have the operational side too, which has to do with the jet in general. These people are getting trained to deal with the inevitable, right? What it looks like going to war, and knowing how to be able to fight in that way. I was actually late because we had a lockdown, because we had an exercise, right? So not expected. I thought I was going to go this afternoon. Didn't work out that way. Got stuck on the base. This is part of what we deal with, is that knowing that we're handling and dealing with this regularly. So if you as an employer can take the time to recognize that a member who is serving as a drill status guardsman or traditionalist, that they might have some symptoms that might occur, whether or not maybe even just the loss, like they transitioned back. They came back from their cycle of deployment, they've returned home, and they just don't seem to be themselves. Trying to engage them appropriately, trying to ask them to show concern and care and genuineness, checking in with them to make sure that they have those resources. Hey, have you talked to anybody? Hey, would you like to talk now? Recognizing that, talking about it, and that's what we're here for today, is trying to normalize the time and the place to have a conversation, is every time, is every place. There's no wrong door. That's my policy. There is no wrong door. You come to talk to me, or you're coming to talk to your commander, or you're going to talk to just one of your buddies. Now's the time. Ask the questions, right? Ask the hard ones. Hey, are you okay? You don't look so good. Have you been sleeping all right? being able to recognize and know that people have the opportunity to share and talk and be heard is really one of the better things that we can do, just as being human beings. So I talked a little bit about combat stress, and part of it is also recognizing that if we talk more about the risks related to the defense cascade, and knowing that our nervous system has two parts, right? We have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system. So the best description I can have for this is 9/11, right? Everyone who was ever in this area, your first response was, if you're an adult, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? What can I do? Can I show up? Can I do this? Can I report in? We had increase of people signing up for the military 2 weeks afterwards, knowing that this was my time to come back in, or I need to do something with my life. This is my mission. This is my calling. Everyone's in a heightened state, right? They're prepared. They are literally ready to do something. Now, if you're a first responder, if you had served in that time frame, going into New York as a responder dealing with the aftermath, 2 weeks in, you start with that shutdown, with that kind of zoning out, that pale face, that unresponsiveness, that kind of just blank stare off into nothing. It's because your nervous system is saying, I need a break. This is too much. When we're talking about people who have had combat experiences, this is very much the normal. Like, you still need to move on. We still need to move forward. For a person, if you're working with them and they might be in this kind of space where it might be months later and they're still dealing with what looks like that kind of defense cascade, that kind of reactionary response where they're just not quite there, that's the best time, if not at any time, right, beforehand, to kind of engage with them, but to really show them that you care about them enough to say, I'm worried about you. If it's a loved one, if it's a sibling, if it's a parent, just showing that concern ultimately can give them the opportunity to really kind of share and express some of the things they've been experiencing. You'd be surprised at what people do tell you. So these actually came from a lot of my unit members because I asked them specifically, hey, can you tell me some of the good things that people ask you about your time in service? Because this happens, right? One of the better questions that I had asked or told to me by the people who were asked was about traditions. Like, do you have any traditions that are like affiliated with your time in service? For those people who are leaving, because people come in the Air National Guard and can stay for 20 years easily, right? And a lot of times that's usually the case. Like, I'm planning on staying I'm a lifer. I'm there for the length of my service. I'm there for 20 years. I'm going in, I'm getting out. I'm not going in for just a one enlistment. I'm there indefinitely. So having traditions, having something that makes part of who they are, and knowing that their uniform means more than just putting it on and just wearing it, right, and having that purpose behind it, kind of helps sets the tone for their, as my Colonel Rout likes to say, own it and bring it, right? I'm bringing it in. I'm showing you what I got. This is who I am. When we talk about bad questions, and I'm not a person that likes to assign value, but good, bad, positive, negative, I think part of that comes from the sensationalization of the military and thinking that what we've seen on TV or what we've seen on the news, that if we saw it happen on the news, it happened to someone that we know who wears the uniform. That is not necessarily the case, nor is it necessarily your right to ask this question, right? When we talk about hard questions are different. They're not the bad questions. The hard questions are you thinking about hurting yourself? Not the questions of, do you like, if you're asking a family, do you think you're concerned about your member going to kill themselves? Do you think they're worried? Like, are you worried about that all the time? That's not something you'd want to ask them, right, directly, because, again, kind of leads to questions as to, like, a little sensationalized. There's a different way of asking. Like, hey, I just want to let you know I'm here for you in case you're worried or you need some resources for your buddy or for your brother or for your husband or for your sister or for your mom. A whole different conversation. And I think part of it is just realizing genuineness that comes from asking the questions, that's what's needed. And that's what the members, especially my members, are most concerned with. They want people to ask them about what it is that their time has meant in their uniform. Maybe some good memories, right? Not necessarily the bad ones. They don't need reminders, I can assure you of that. So speaking of the ugly questions, but not to ask questions, I guess. And like I said, these are questions that have actually been asked to my members. This picture, and just as an aside, so the picture you see here was actually taken by our command chief, Mike Sears. See that? That's the last Jersey Devil leaving Afghanistan Air Base, right? Last jet to leave. So, again, going with the idea of if you're genuine in the concerns that you ask someone, as a clinician, I have a responsibility to ask some hard questions. It's part of my job. I'm not going to ask the ugly ones. And I will tell you, I've had people tell me some ugly stories. I've bared that with them. I've had people literally, blank stare off into nothingness, recounting horrible situations and experiences. It's not something that I encourage anybody to be a part of. Being in my role and my responsibility, I kind of have to. And I don't mind because I have resources for myself. And I make sure I use them. But as just an average concerned citizen, I would never think of asking these horrible questions. They won't get you anywhere. They won't make things better. They just make things more hurtful. So, speaking about the hard questions, I know you're going to have a talk a little later by Matt and Rhonda. We do mention the idea that suicide prevention is everyone's business, and because my policy is there is no wrong door, there is no way that I would hope that any one of my senior leadership or any of my younger airmen would take the time to not say, like, hey, I don't know how to ask the question. We do annual training every year. Suicide prevention is a requirement. It's also for the requirement for the Army Guard. So part of it is realizing that it's a human issue. It's a human condition, right? Being alive. It's also a human condition of dying. Knowing that when a person takes action to cause the end of their life, if and when that person has ever served in the military, they are at a greater risk. So if you know someone or an employer of someone who is in the military, who has served, part of our responsibility is to bear that with them, to ask them if they're not doing well, to check in, right? Build that connection, because one thing we do know is that connection is one of the ways that we can actually reduce the risk of someone taking their lives. Reaching out, talking, checking in with, having conversations, knowing that, letting them know that you care about them and what they're doing. Saying that I see them, I see you as a human. You're not a robot, right? You're not just a being in a uniform, that you are something more. Recognizing that the hard questions that we ask someone about if they have plans on hurting themselves or if they've ever thought about hurting themselves, is it not because we're trying to, again, sensationalize it? We're just trying to make sure that they know that there's people that care about them. We want to take the time to let them know that we are one of those people who care about them. So, if you're not somebody who's comfortable with asking, or if you have a team that's not comfortable with asking, because I've had that happen too, where I've had senior leadership who have said to me flat out, like, I don't even know what to say. If I have someone that comes in my office and they're like, things have been going pretty bad for me, and I'm not sure exactly what to do. And the senior leadership person looks at them and says, I don't know either. Well, to be honest, there's nothing wrong with that response, right? Not everybody's going to know, but hey, I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to be present with you in this moment. I'm going to help you the best way that I can. So why don't we do this together? Let's go take a walk. Let's go see Jen. Let's go check out the medical group. Let's go see the first shirt. Whatever it might be that could help them with the next step, knowing that you're not leaving them. And that might even be if you, as an employer, are looking at someone and talking to them because you know that things aren't going well for them at home, or you know things aren't going well for them at work because they've had a lot of absences, or they've been doing poorly in their job performance. There's nothing wrong with asking, are you okay? And if you're not okay, how can I help you right now? What can I do to make sure that you're going to be okay? Showing the genuineness behind it, that you're interested in how they're functioning, really does help promote their understanding of your willingness to stand with them, which I think ultimately allows that opportunity of accepting that I'm not okay right now. Wow, so you can see that. Because how many of us have been in a place where we're like, oh, no one knows what's going on inside my head, right? And let's be real, not everybody wants to know what's going on inside everybody's head. The possibility, though, that someone's going to hear you and see you as you are and accepts you without judgment and says, hey, I know we may not get along, but that's okay. Or I may be your boss. Well, that's all right. But for right now, ranks off. Boss is out the door. I want to make sure you're going to be okay. And how can I do that to best support you? What do you need from me right now? Being shocked, showing that kind of, oh no, I don't know what to do. I think that just kind of puts someone into a position of immediate defensiveness, like, no, it's okay, I'll be all right. And I think ultimately being able to hold that space for them and give opportunity for them to share really does give better support to the possibility of them doing and acting more in a safe manner than taking and acting in some way otherwise to cause maybe possibly injury or death. If you don't have the number, who knows the number off the top of their heads? And don't cheat. Matthew, don't you dare. Anybody know? Even the text number. What's the text number? You needed a text. Anybody? No one knows the text number, or are you just too cold to speak? Thanks, Pat. If you don't have the number, I encourage you to put it in your phone. Take a picture of the card. Keep the website open. Tag it as a favorite. You can have a chat line. You would be surprised at how many times I've had the opportunity to sit down with someone, and oftentimes they just want to talk, which is fine. But they're coming to see me, it's because either because I'm a voluntary asset on the base. No one's forced to come see me. They don't have to. That's a little caveat there. There are some situations where they do have to, but in most situations they don't. There's been times where I've literally sat there and said, hey, how about we call the line together? Let's call the crisis line right now. And they kind of look at me and they're like, well, isn't that what your job is? And I'm like, nope, I am not crisis, but I'm going to be here with you through it. Because yes, that might be my job, but it's also because I care. So let's make that call now. And we've done it. And I've literally said, hey, hi, this is Jen. I have such and such person here with me. They've been going through some stuff, and they really need someone to talk to. Do you mind if I hand the phone to you? And sure enough, it works. And I get up, and I slowly walk out of my office and let them have their time. You'd be surprised at the opportunity that can help with building that possibility of that person holding on to hope for one more day. And maybe even extending that beyond, because they realize that they are not alone and they have somebody out there that cares about them. Not just me, not just their family. So if you haven't seen it, there's those 5 steps, right? So be the one to, right? I think that becomes my biggest point to make across my base is, again, with the idea that there is no wrong door, is be the one to. Be the one to ask the hard questions. Be the one to stand by when someone needs you. Be the one to be willing to go to the end, the degree of whatever the situation might be. Recognizing that person, that you would want someone to do it with you if you were in the place or in the space. And maybe you have been, and you did have someone who was there with you. Be that one that might help that next situation to not become something of death and can actually become something of survivability. So, in wrapping up, one of the bigger issues, and the reason why I made it a point at my base, was to make this transition from my members leaving the military and moving off base. So what I kind of classify as being beyond the base, because there we are in South Jersey, right? We're about 20 minutes outside of Atlantic City. We do make a lot of noise up and down the coast. If you've ever been to the air show, my gals and guys are out there making a whole lot of noise. The base is busy and beyond busy for that week in August. It's a great time. Ultimately, though, that time does come to an end. And making sure that people like the Wilmington and New Jersey VA and Philadelphia VA are present and available to help my members, whether or not they're eligible, whether, what questions to ask, like what happens next, what do I do? I've only had one enlistment. I don't know if I'm eligible. Have you deployed? Have you been exposed? Have you done this? Have you done that? The questions that maybe you may not be aware of, the questions that people don't know, where do you find the information at? That was, to me, something that was really important, and I made a priority. Because beyond the base, there is life, right? Our citizen airmen have everyday opportunities, whether or not they're AGR or they're a drill status guardsman, or one of the other 5 possible statuses that someone can be at my base. They have lives not everybody comes from around the Atlantic County area, which is where our base is located. They come from all over. To be honest, I have a fighter pilot who flies in every drill from Alaska. Not in his own jet, but he does fly in. He's a pilot, so he can fly and jump on any other plane that comes in. I'm kind of lucky in that way. Otherwise, he's got a RUTA, especially right now. But we have people that come from all over the place to come to New Jersey to be Jersey Devils. It's pretty impressive. We have over 1,200 airmen that are at our base. We're not a tiny base. We're a tiny space, but not a tiny base. Talking to them about the idea of life after the military and what that might look like for them is a really complicated conversation, and one that I think has to take a lot of time. And it gives a lot of breath to. And as employers struggle with trying to help individuals transition, I think it's important for them to understand all the challenges that can come into what that might look like. Because there's nothing better than employing someone who's been in the military. I can tell you that right from the get-go. Their dedication, their commitment, just the presence of their ability. I mean, the fact that someone enlisted and joined in the military, again, it might have been because they had nothing else better to do, which is hardly the case. They wanted to be helpers. They wanted to do something bigger than themselves. They had purpose beyond just being the kid who didn't know what they wanted to do. And when they leave the military, they have that. They have an amazing amount of talent, resources, connections, capabilities, resumes that just are shocking. So to me, it's the opportunity and creating that next level of what their response might look like and what they're going to do beyond. Because having had this opportunity to work on, and granted, we got some old jets, no doubt there. I think our oldest jet is 38 years old. Older than most of the kids working on them, and definitely older than some of the pilots that are flying them. The fact that they can take and fix these things and fly them in the air and keep them going is really talent. The fact that they show up every day, and they show up when people, kind of look at and say, like, why bother? You'd be surprised. They're a whole different group of people because they really are about the we process. And I'm talking about these younger Gen Zers. They really do want to do better and do bigger with everyone. And it's an amazing part. So I'm looking forward to the opportunities that they bring to the working programs that are out there and available to them. As far as for those that are reaching their max time and are leaving us for the opportunities for their future, part of that is looking at what might look like for them and that transitional point, because they've lost so much along the way. And I don't mean lost, but I mean lost as far as time. Well, maybe that's not right either. They've gained opportunities, maybe just in their experience, but just realizing that loss of the uniform and not having to wear that and what that might look like becomes the next concern. Like, what am I going to do with myself now? It's funny, I talked to one of our retiring senior master sergeants, and I saw him, he came back, he's got a full beard, which is really unusual, right? Because you're not used to seeing them after they leave. From the uniform, fully shaved, maybe occasional mustache, but now full beard, and it's all white. I looked at him, and I'm like, so what's it like? And he's like, it's kind of funny, because I get the reminder calls, every drill, 6 o'clock, and I roll over, and I look at it, and I giggle, and I go back to sleep. I said, that must be an amazing sense of just that accomplishment. And he goes, it's kind of enjoyable, but it's kind of a little sad, too. And I'm like, well, I can bet. And that kind of part of it, kind of recognizing what that is for any person who has spent 20 plus years wearing the uniform, taking and making sacrifices, making adjustments throughout their lifetime to help others to do more beyond what their own families have had to deal with, is pretty remarkable. And I think giving them that kind of kudos for that, I can definitely appreciate. So, last part. What you see up there is my son. So he's a crew chief, Staff Sergeant Baldwin. Oh, that's not it. That's a different one. Ah, I missed a couple. There he is. So he did the Tillman run, or walk, there in Afghanistan. He was actually one of the last group that went through. Right there are all his crew chiefs with one of our jets there in Bagram, getting ready for it to roll out, kind of fixing up. He's in the phase, so he does all the inspections and preparations for any jet that has to roll out. I think the bigger picture here is that, yes, I am, as Jackie said, I am the mother of an AGR member and veteran. I am also the wife of a veteran, Coast Guard. So I do understand the sacrifices that many of our families have to tolerate in order to help those that are currently serving. But I do want you to understand that you get so much in return, and we can never be grateful for whatever their sacrifice might look like. They may not accept it. They may be frustrated by it, but we do our best to kind of show them as much as possible. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for allowing me to share. And I'll be around if anybody has any questions. Is there any questions specifically anybody has? Oh, yeah, no wrong door. No wrong question. I mean, just not the ugly ones, I guess, but I don't know if I did.
No questions because you were so thorough.
Or they're freezing, one or the other.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you very much. Give Jen a nice round of applause there. Jen, you want this back? You want me to keep it? Oh, maybe. I'll leave it. I'll leave it. That's fine. I'm going to read a little bit about our next presenter. I'm sure you've seen him walking around. He just stood up. His beard precedes him. Ryan Lertsema is a U.S. Army veteran. He was with the Ordnance Corps from 2008 to 2016. He spent some time from Georgia to Kuwait to Iraq to Germany. There's a little bit of Ryan everywhere, I think. Retiring from the service, he graduated from Stockton University, took a position with the Ocean County College as the Veteran Coordinator in 2019. He established a Veteran and Military Resource Center, and his focus was community engagement and developing integrity and performance. Military-connected community members, especially after attending higher education. Remarkably, Ryan, in his short 2 years, has done a lot. He has been very busy. The veteran coordinator developing and marketing strategies for full redevelopment of the Ocean County College website platform, their social media presence, creating a Student Veterans of America, a Student Veteran Organization chapter, Salute to Honor Society, as well as the first institutional recipient of the Prisoner of War Chair for Community College campus in New Jersey. So congratulations to Ryan on that, but that's not all. He's been serving as the principal liaison and assistant director to military services on campus. Ryan was awarded the GI Jobs 2021 Veteran Champion of Education and Grant Award recipient of the Center for Excellence for Veteran Student Success and Training. Director of Green Zone Training, normalizing military and veteran cultural awareness. And as of May 2022, Ryan has been selected for the Marquis Who's Who Albert Nelson Marquis Lifetime Achievement Award, recognized for commitment to personal and professional craft, outreach, advocacy, and civic excellence. So that was quite a lot there. So here he is, Ryan Lertsema. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. So my presentation is more about community engagement, collecting everyone in either a social diameter or a more experience opportunity, activities, etc. Not so much higher education focused, but that's just where my platform starts. So where I'd start off with, and what I typically try to talk about, is when I got out of the military. I got out from Wiesbaden Airfield in Germany, and it was an experience that from underappreciating of what TAPS program is, and everyone knows Transition Assistance Program. It is, for me, it was a week-long opportunity to learn about how to get out of the military, but I didn't take advantage of that opportunity. So getting out from Germany, my family coming back to Jersey, it was a terrifying experience. And sometimes it's hard to really explain that to people. Getting out of the military, whether you're being medically retired like myself, or you're being discharged honorably or you're going from one lifestyle to a dramatically different lifestyle. For me, I was a high school dropout. I dropped out of Egg Harbor Township High School, and I enrolled into the Fort Dix Military Academy, also known as the Challenge Academy. So that is a military-based type education platform. and my older sister, still presently in the military, she kind of showcased the opportunities of what the military does for people in my position that needed a little bit more guidance, a little bit more structure, and didn't really have a very thorough family dynamic household. So transitioning out, forward speaking, it's going into the deep end of the pool with not truly knowing how to swim. You know how to maybe float and maybe get to the sides of the pool, or you know how to grip to something to try and stay afloat, but are you really swimming? No, you're not. You're just staying afloat and hoping that the next stroke will keep you still breathing above water. That's what my experience was. So up here, there's 5 areas that I'd like to try to explain on gathering of veterans and gathering of military and gathering of our community and what that purpose is and how to get there and what it actually means to the community when you can get everyone together. When you advocate for the what, and the what is very specific because you want to target an objective that meets at least mutually everyone's own goals and ambitions. It's drive. It is trying to have your first mission forward. You're trying to even elaborate an idea. And then you want the buy-in from the community, whether it is a military organization or if it is your constituents, which mine currently is students. You want to make sure that they're valued, their time is valued, their effort is valued, their past is valued. And that's what you're advocating to the what. You want to target that as an objective. Then when you go into the purpose, that's going to truly optimize everyone in that community, whether that is the organization you're partnering with, whether that is your students, for me, that you are ensuring that their time is valued to that purpose that you're trying to collect. And then when you're going into the stakeholders, you want to ensure it's almost like a pillar. Let's just say that you have a military community or your family entity and you think it's only structured, your event is specifically structured for the military constituents, but you don't have any information for their family members, their children, their spouses, their dependents, or even the non-military. Then you're devaluing your own event because you're not catering to their needs as well. If you open up that perspective and you're opening up the opportunity to everyone in that person's party, then you're actually giving more purpose for them to attend. You're giving more purpose to everyone being a part of your event and your activity, and you're ensuring that everyone's going to engage at the same time. When you're going into the targeted audiences, like for here, we're talking about veteran suicide, we're talking about different parameters to ensure that there are safety measures for mental resiliency, mental health needs, resources, etc. These are different stakeholders that this event specifically caters for. When you're trying to put together an event to cater those different parameters, that's what you want to have a purpose for. That's what you want to target your stakeholders with. Speaking more about exceeding the expected. David spoke a little bit about this in his presentation. It's that you have your self goals, you have your self limits that you identify for yourself, but those are just what you set for yourself. If you truly try to showcase your goals and what you want to do outward to other people, they will naturally motivate you to do more for yourself as well as who you're trying to target for your event or activity. That's why I try to indicate that if you're trying to exceed your own expectations, bring others along. Because you're creating this atmosphere of positive enforcement. And I try to say that because I live positively. There's a saying that you can't touch my positivity. It doesn't matter what situation you're in, it's that you're always forward. Or a motto from my own previous unit is Semper Decuum. You're always forward, always stepping forward in the direction. Whether it's your engagement, your event, your activity, your community, yourself, your family, always move forward. So one of the platforms that I created is called Veterans Voices. It's a televised program hosted out of Ocean County College, and it is a media televised program platform where I bring in nonprofits, agencies, companies even, corporate entities, or even personalized advocates for the military community. I am not a televised person. I've never thought about being on TV. No idea. I just saw a TV studio on campus that hasn't been used in 20 years. I'm like, well, let's put it to use. Why not? And we did. We have 9 episodes. We're also on YouTube. We cover over 350,000 people across the Northeast region. We have episodes ranging from Project Refit, right here on the presentation. That's Dan and James. Project Refit is a nonprofit organization local to New Jersey. They really do go all over the country for their mission, but they stay local. This is just an idea and concept where I thought that there was a targeted audience for a lot of these agencies that support the military and veteran community that's just not getting their word out. They're not getting their platform out to really showcase the capabilities of their own platforms. So this is just another one of the initiatives that is still in the works, but yeah, we're 9 episodes in. It's pretty good. So another piece for gathering the community is being present, being in the opportunity at hand, putting yourself out there for others to ask you questions on your expertise, on your experiences, on your own personal preference on what can be effective and effective. This is a picture for the groundbreaking ceremony for the CBOC coming to Toms River. There's 2 projects that may or may not be known publicly, but New Jersey was awarded 2 of them for Atlantic County and Ocean County CBOCs. So it's an incredible feat for little old New Jersey, but it's actually a powerful state for military and veteran constituents. So we're hopefully everything is going to be moving forward with that. So another one is just about being involved, getting your experience, your perspective out there because you are unique. There's not one single military person, whether family, dependent, spouse, guard, reserve, active duty, veteran, non-combat veteran, et cetera, that is the same. Get your experience out there because it also empowers you and gives you provided value to what you did while in service or out of service or in support of service. There's another piece that I just like to mention is that what, again, my colleague Dave said earlier, is that a lot of times military personnel, again, whether you're serving in uniform or not, don't value that experience because of pop culture narrative. You have to put that literally on the sideline and have your own personal reflection on your own experience. I say the Ordnance Corps, and I say that I served from 2008 to 2016, and I did all these different type of experiences. But that was my own personal, unique opportunity that I needed to experience in the military to who I am now today. Everyone here sitting at this event and watching in has their own unique experience. I didn't have to talk about coming and going from the Fort Dix Military Academy, but that created my foundation of what I needed to develop my own self into the military, into the Army, until now, higher education with a hospitality degree. Who'd have thought? So when you're trying to create these initiatives and you're trying to create these activities to really showcase your own view, your own unique perspective on what you think can make a program successful and how you want to be effective, here's a couple things to know about Ocean County and New Jersey. We are literally the most densely populated state in the country. We're also one of the densely populated states in the country for military and veteran community members. Not only does that, it's significant, but what comes with that? You have suicide rates, you have resource requirement needs, unemployment rates, homelessness, food scarcity, even marital concerns and issues. A lot of concerning factors come with dense population groups, which creates, again, positive thinking opportunity. My presentation's pretty quick, but these are standing words, oaths, mottos, and action terms that outlines every person who adorns the cloth of the military. It doesn't matter what branch you're from, doesn't matter how many crayons you eat, it doesn't matter who you're affiliated with. It truly just defines you as a character by when you served and by when you're done serving. But only you as a person, whether in uniform or not, affiliated or not, completes that task of serving. I think a lot of times people misconstrue that understanding of what it means to serve in uniform and then serving out of uniform. My job in higher education is to not only create a successful pathway for military affiliated students, but it's also to guide them after that experience, to mentor them through their undergraduates program, graduates program, trade skills experience, or even if they want to drop out of the program, my job's not done. But that's still me serving even though I'm not in uniform. They won't let me serve because of my beard. I'm not cutting my beard off. When you can have that experience and you're creating that ideal structure to create an activity to engage with people that shares the same ideals and challenges you to create a better and more positive effect for yourself and who you're trying to affect, that's when you can maybe challenge the thought that you're done serving. Thank you. Any questions? Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Excellent job, Ryan. Thank you. So the next up, before I do that, I just want to say something to Ryan really quickly. What episode was the outreach team from Wilmington, Ryan? What episode was the Wilmington VA outreach team on your show? I want to say it was probably 7 or 8. Very interesting that Ocean County Community College is putting out that information and giving us an opportunity to be able to connect veterans to VA healthcare. Also, he was talking about the new CBOC in Toms River. Just so that everybody in this room is aware and understands, and everybody that's watching or listening, enrolling for VA healthcare is not just about the veteran that is enrolling. It is about every other veteran who may need it more than that one veteran. Enrolling for VA healthcare and utilizing the services is why you are seeing these clinics come up in certain areas, in more rural areas or areas where veterans don't have to travel. Small integrated healthcare facilities that may have different services throughout that area, but can be shared by the veterans that are enrolled in that system. So I'm glad that that slide was up there. I think that's very important to know. For our Wilmington VA Medical Center, we've had over the last 6 or 7 years, 5 brand new clinics. And that's because the numbers will justify the means. For the amount of veterans utilizing, needing those services closer to home, then Washington will allocate the okay so that VA then can start looking to put these new facilities in other areas. So it is critically important that if you know a veteran, you are a veteran, and you've never connected to VA, please come and see me. Please come and see Dave Brimmer over there, depending on where you live. And if it's the Michael J. Cresens, or Corporal Michael J. Cresens, we also have Rhonda, who's coming up in a few minutes, and she'll be able to help you there as well. So speaking of Rhonda and my friend, Matthew Jacobs, are going to come up as a team. So I'm going to just read a little bit about both of them so you know who's coming up to present here. So Matt Jacobs is a licensed clinical social worker, and he's worked in the area of mental health since 2005. He really doesn't look that old, but okay. So 2005. Matt was hired by the VA in 2016, and he previously worked for other local agencies to include Ascenda Health and AtlantiCare. Matt began his career with the VA, helping veterans as a case manager, and later in the suicide prevention as the suicide prevention coordinator for Southern New Jersey, including Cape Atlantic, Cumberland, and Salem counties. Matt has experience providing direct clinical care to veterans, and he currently serves as our Community Engagement and Partnerships Coordinator, or CEPC, as a part of our Vision 4 team, which covers everybody but Dave Brimmer. Sorry. He'll talk to us about his efforts and ways that you may be able to help assist veterans locally. And Rhonda Hart, who's coming up with him, is, like I said, she is from the Corporal Michael J. Cresens Medical Center, formerly the Philadelphia VA Medical Center. And she is the Community Engagement and Partnership Coordinator, or the CEPC, at the medical center. She's been there for 7 years. She worked with the HUD-VASH team, which is our homeless team, and she is also a social worker. You were at the West Philadelphia, I believe, the West Philadelphia Clinic. Prior to her work with the VA, Rhonda worked as a psychiatric social worker in the Philadelphia prison system. So if I could have the team of Matthew Jacobs and Rhonda Hart come on up to the stage, please. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
All right. I'm always keenly aware that when I'm standing in between folks and their ride home, to be short and sweet. So I want to just share a little bit about the new wave and sort of the way the VA is currently engaging in suicide prevention efforts. Mr. Luby started the day off this morning, and he said some words about KOVA, keep our vets alive. I think we need to add to that, keep our vets alive and help them to thrive. Because really, when we talk about suicide prevention, it's not just confronting the thoughts that somebody may have about suicide. One of the things that we do as CEPCs is we talk about going upstream. One of the things I said to Pat Carney a while back is, if a community is experiencing an inordinate amount of home fires, one person might say, well, we need to get better fire equipment. We need to get new fire trucks and more firemen. And that may be true. But what we may need to do is educate the public on the equipment to prevent the fires, and smoke detectors in the home, and being aware of how to prevent the fires to begin with. And that's really where we're at in the VA in terms of suicide prevention, is going upstream and learning how to confront these issues before they become a crisis. So some of the things that you're going to hear today is, I'm going to start off that suicide prevention is a public health issue. We don't look at suicide prevention as being an issue that the Army or the National Guard needs to work with, or that some of the higher ups need to deal with. We really look at the entire community as a whole. I served as a suicide prevention coordinator prior to this role, and I worked with a lot of vets who were dealing with suicidal ideations, dealing with either previous attempts or considerable suicidal ideations. And in working with those veterans, one of the things that you come to realize is that things started to unravel a long time ago. And they didn't maybe have an opportunity to share or really know how to confront these issues, or even maybe an awareness about these issues. But oftentimes you realize their aunt knew they were suffering, their mom knew there was a problem, their brother knew there was an issue, and the guys they served with all knew that something was wrong. So we bring this up to say this is really a public health issue. Jen Baldwin just spoke about there's no wrong doors to enter through. And I think that's so important as we deal with suicide prevention. You may be the person who would actually be standing between somebody and a bad decision. And I don't think we often think about that. We often think, well, we'll leave that to the clinicians to figure out. We'll leave that to someone else to figure out. But if you leave here with nothing else today, just know that you can play a role in preventing suicide. This is a public health issue. There was some data shared this morning in the SAVE presentation, and we looked at some information related to suicide means and different ways and things that lead to suicide. Some of the data sets that we looked at, but there are some anchors of hope, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of these. One is that from 2018 to 2019. It was the first time we'd ever seen a significant decrease in the number of suicides. Mr. Luby said this morning that 2/3 of veterans who die by suicide are not connected to VA care. Now that could be for a number of reasons. That could be because maybe they have health care through an employer. Maybe they get health care through their spouse. Maybe they simply, for whatever reason, decide they don't want VA health care, and that's okay. But knowing that information, we as a community, we as the general public, we have to be equipped and know and be aware that, hey, these veterans are out here living in our communities. They're working in our communities. They're going to our faith communities. They're involved in coaching your kids' baseball team. They are in our community. They're living with us. They're around us. You may not even know that they're a veteran, but they're right there in the community serving and continuing to serve. So it's important to know that we as a public need to be engaging with these veterans. But that certainly gives us hope. That there's fewer veterans die by suicide in a 1-year span. And that was actually absolutely unprecedented. This data has been followed very closely for more than 20 years. And in more than 2 decades of research, to have a reversal like that is really profound and something that we can cling to and hope to see more of. Also, there was a decrease in the adjusted suicide rate for veterans. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but basically that's a good thing to see these numbers going in a different direction for once. We'd like to attribute it to some of the efforts and some of the focus. This is the #1 clinical priority for the VA. However, it is, again, the community's job to really kind of engage in these things. So just a couple of things that we can cling to in terms of hope. So around the VA, we do talk about that suicide is everyone's business. There's whether you're working as a parking attendant in a parking lot somewhere, or you're the director of psychiatry, or if you're in housekeeping, or if you're a mental health clinician, certainly, it is everyone's business to recognize if somebody's upset or somebody's struggling, just to check in with them and let them know that they were noticed. A famous story that's shared by somebody who attempted to take their life by jumping off of the Golden Gate Bridge. He decided that morning that he was going to take his life, but he said, if one person notices me or extends an olive branch out to me, then maybe I won't do this. And this person took public transportation while sobbing on the public transportation. Nobody said anything. He walked up the bridge. Nobody said anything to him. He got to the top of the bridge. Somebody finally said something to him. They said, hey, can you take our picture? And he said, that's the final straw. Nobody notices, nobody sees me, nobody is here for me. And I think we have to kind of learn something from that example, is to say, if you notice someone who's struggling, or even if you just haven't checked in with someone in a while, the veterans that you know, just take a minute and reach out and touch base. Let them know you care. This is really everyone's business. So at the VA, where's my clicker? We talk about suicide prevention 2.0. So this is sort of like the second evolution of suicide prevention, which is extending beyond just the clinical realm and entering into the community. So I'm going to just spend just a brief moment on here, and in a minute we're going to invite Rhonda up to talk here, and it'll be a treat for you to hear from her. There's some focus areas that we have around suicide prevention, and this has been well studied and well thought out, but I just want to bring it to your attention because this is the areas that the VA is focusing their efforts as it relates to suicide prevention. Some people say, well, what's the VA doing? What are they trying to do to address this problem of suicide? And I'm going to talk to you just briefly here about the priority areas. Number one is to identify service members, veterans, and their families. You may hear the term SMVF, and to screen for suicide risk. Why identify? Well, hey, you may be working with people who are veterans and you just may not know it. We want to identify these folks in the community. One of the coalitions that I've been working alongside some other folks here, especially Pat Carney, is the Cape Atlantic Veterans Coalition, CAVS, Coalition Against Veteran Suicide. And essentially one of the things that we're working on there is identifying veterans in the workplace and identifying communities that can be checking in with one another. So in the Army, you have monthly checks to make sure your equipment's right. Right? You don't want to be in the Army and have a firearm that doesn't work, or goggles don't work, or something that's put together incorrectly. You want to know ahead of time. So we are developing a system where we are going into workplaces, identifying those veterans, and creating a community where we can check in monthly. So we're pretty excited about that. The second one is to promote connectedness and to improve care transitions. Mr. Luby mentioned the Governor's Challenge for Suicide Prevention in New Jersey. I am the team lead for the second area, promoting connectedness. One of the initiatives that we're working on is called ETS, Expiration Term of Service. This is a sponsorship program where we're coupling a sponsor in local communities to sponsor a veteran who moved into that area. So you may say to yourself, wow, that sounds like a great idea, or wow, I wish I would have had that. I'd invite you to become a sponsor. ETS is, you can find it on the internet. I didn't create a slide for it, but you can sponsor a local service member who has just recently become a veteran and help them with things like, hey, figuring out where your kid's going to go to school, which employers are good for veterans, what's a good neighborhood to move into, all those kinds of things that any of us would be dealing with, but even more so as a new young veteran who may be just separated from their military service. So promoting connectedness and improving those care transitions. And then lastly is to increase lethal means safety and safety planning. There's a profound slide in the SAVE training that you saw this morning, and you may not have picked up on it, but more than 70% of suicides are people who made the decision and acted on it within 1 hour. Well, you say, well, why does that matter? Well, we want to make sure that we have lethal means safety out there. Listen, if you're somebody who's struggling with suicide, we may not need to take the guns out of the home, but maybe we just need to separate the ammunition for a season. Maybe we need to lock those guns up and give them to a spouse or somebody who cares. This is a very sensitive topic, I understand that, and it's one that's very difficult to talk about. But what you're going to see is lethal means safety in the home is becoming important. And let's be honest, frankly, this is not just about the veterans. This is also about their family members as well. Because like a colleague of mine said a couple months ago, those firearms are going to long outlive the family members or the veteran himself. So we want to make sure that we have lethal means safety in the home to make sure that everybody in the home stays safe. And then safety planning is a big one for me. When I worked as a direct care clinician, I would often spend 45 minutes to an hour coming up with a plan to stay safe. Hey, it's Thursday at 1 o'clock, and I know you're safe now, but what happens on 10 o'clock Saturday night when I'm not with you? What happens at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep and you've been having nightmares? What happens when you've got a couple beers in you and you've got some thoughts running through your head? We want to come up with a plan to stay safe. So these are some of the areas that the VA is really committed to as it relates to the focused area for suicide prevention. not going to spend a lot of time on this because I want to allow some time for Rhonda to speak, but Governor's Challenge, together with veterans, community engagement, these are all areas that we're focused on in my role as Community Engagement Partnership Coordinator, which I'll just talk about right now. I can change my slide. So this is Rhonda and I, this is our role. This is some of what we do. And essentially, you know, and I don't want to speak for Rhonda, but I know for me, one of the main passions and one of the things that we are very committed to is developing coalitions, organizations like this one, which are making commitments to keep our veterans safe. So we want to make sure that we're disseminating information out in the communities and getting it to where it needs to be. Here's a couple examples. You've already experienced the SAVE training. Suicide Prevention Month is in September. So I would encourage you to maybe get out and walk in your community or get out into one of the many events that will be taking place in September. So I know I said a lot and I covered a lot of ground today. I just want to thank you. And I just want to ask you if you might consider being a part of a coalition in your community. Maybe you can donate an hour. Maybe you can donate 5 hours a month. Maybe you can donate some other resources to the cause. But I would encourage you to get involved because really that's where we want to be. We want to be upstream. We want to be engaging our community members. We want to be identifying those folks. We want to promote that connectedness, and we want to make sure that they're staying safe. So I am so thankful for this opportunity to just share those thoughts with you today. I'm going to hold questions from me until the end. And you are in for a real treat because I have to say, my colleague here, Rhonda Hart, she has a heart as big as this room, and I think her last name is very fitting. She has done some awesome work in Philadelphia. She's tasked with the largest county in all of Pennsylvania. Those efforts have not gone unnoticed. So I will let Rhonda take the microphone now before I talk about her anymore. It's a pleasure to introduce Rhonda Hart.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. This is great. I think you know all about me by now, huh? I did want to add that I am also a suicide loss survivor. My brother died by suicide in 2006. So I consider myself really lucky to be doing this work because I'm personally passionate about it. And I'm professionally very much interested and committed to this work. So thanks for having me. Oh, no, not that picture. Don't mind that picture. It's huge. Yeah, oh, there we go. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the data, because we kind of can't get away from the data because that's what drives our work. So you'll see on the screen, which is very nice to have up there, it's a huge screen, the data that I want to talk about. So just some facts about veteran suicide. So we know that 18% of all deaths by suicide among US adults were veterans. We know that there's more than 6,000 veteran suicides each year. And you can kind of go on down the list, and I'm going to stop at veterans are more likely than a general population to use a firearm, which we've been talking a lot about. And then 17 veterans die by suicide every day. Of the 17, 11 are not connected with VHA care, and that stands for Veterans Health Administration care. And they are out in the community. They're our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, and they are receiving services in the community. So the VA has said, we want to reach veterans regardless if they are receiving VA care. Doesn't matter, they're a veteran, and we want to make sure that they have the resources that they need. So Matt and I are lucky to have these positions. VA created these community engagement and partnership coordinators 18 months ago, so this role is fairly new. And it's a very good role to allow us to be in the community with community stakeholders, veterans, and their family members, working together to come up with programming and activities to prevent suicide amongst service members, veterans, and their families. I also want to point out that the age group of 18 through 34 have the highest rate of suicide. And I'm pointing these statistics out because this is why we're doing the work that we're doing. So if 18 to 34, as I mentioned, has the highest rate. 55 and older continues to have the highest count. And then we have female veterans. They have a 2.2% higher, 2.2 times higher amongst female veterans. Sorry, that was a little small on my paper. So with all that being said, we move into this coalition work, right? So, ready? Oh, I got it. Okay, thank you. So here's the process. Here's what it looks like. We know what the problem is. Matt and I, conduct what we call landscape analysis. So we're scanning the communities that we're wanting to work in. We want to know who should be at the table, right? So there's the landscape analysis, and then there's the connecting of the people, bringing folks together. And then once we bring folks together, we want to talk about the gaps in services. What's missing? What can we do to address whatever problem a stakeholder, veteran, or community member identifies? After we talk about gaps in services, we're going to talk about a SWOT analysis. And a SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, I like to say opportunities and threats. Instead of saying weaknesses, I like to say opportunities, but that's just a personal thing. I'm a social worker, and we work from a strength-based perspective. So gaps in services, SWOT analysis, action planning. So now we've talked about, and it's hypothetical, although this is exactly what we do. This is the process. So we've talked about what those gaps are. We've talked about what the strengths, area for improvements, opportunities and threats. Now, action planning. What can we do with the resources that we have to address those gaps in services? There's a lot of things I like about my job. I really love my job, honestly. But one of the things I like is that these coalitions that we get to build in the community, they don't belong to VA. They belong to the community. So we don't have to worry about the bureaucracy, if we're honest, right? We know sometimes federal government, it can be a bit of a bureaucracy. When we work together on a community level, the coalitions belong to the community, and we don't have the bureaucracy, which I really, really like. So then we move into implementation, evaluation, and sustainability, all the good stuff, right? So I just want to end with a few coalitions that I've been a part of and helped to launch in Pennsylvania and one here in New Jersey. So we have the Bucks County SMVF Suicide Prevention Committee, which is under the Bucks County Suicide Prevention Task Force. And we launched that coalition about a year ago. The priority areas include identifying service members, veterans, and their families, and screening for suicide, and also promoting connectedness. In terms of programming, some of the programming that we've been able to do is we held 3 separate community forums in Bucks County. They're wonderful. And we had veterans, family members come in and talk to us. and tell us, what they see are the gaps or the issues that veterans, service members, and their families face in Bucks County. We're also in the process of working with Sesame Place to offer service members, veterans, and their families. Now you see why we use the acronym SMVF, so we won't have to say, the acronym's always better. So we're working with Sesame Place to offer SMVFs the opportunity to come with their families to Sesame Place and just have fun. Right? Because that was some feedback that we had received at one of the community meetings, that veterans and their families, they want to have fun. They want, they don't always want to talk about the hard stuff. And of course, it would be a great opportunity for us to socialize and to table and give information in the midst of having fun. So that's in process right now. Then there's the art and wellness for veterans and their families, where the priority area is to promote connectedness. And they are interested in doing pop-up shops in the city of Philadelphia. So just recently, they had a veterans drumming circle at Penn Museum. It was wonderful. It was in the mosaic room at the Penn Museum. So it was beautiful. The environment was beautiful. And it was very moving for a lot of people. And then finally, the Camden County Families of Veterans and Service Members, which launched on March 21st. The priority areas include promoting connectedness and care transition. They're currently working on a resource guide specifically for family members of service members. We're also talking about QPR and VA SAVE training. Actually, Kathleen is here with us today, and she has just taken on the co-chair leadership role for the Camden County Families Coalition. So Kathleen, you want to say hello? Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Anybody have any questions for Matt or for Rhonda? We were going to ask everybody from the panel to come up and have a seat here, although I think we've asked after every person if they had any questions. So we're going to, I didn't even introduce you yet. No questions right there. I got a lot of negative head turns, but I do want to, oh, Jeff Eggett. Mr. Eggett, you have a question, sir. I think you have to, yep, there you go.
Is that on?
It is on.
Excuse me. So I was wondering if you did any outreach, either Rhonda, Matt, either of you, within your respective VA areas with law enforcement. Just recently, last week or two, the Attorney General of New Jersey put out a resiliency letter, frankly, because the rates of suicide among law enforcement in New Jersey have skyrocketed, which is unfortunate. We do a lot of work, myself included, to help veterans, but introspectively, we're probably the last ones to ever seek assistance, knowing that the vet centers in particular can provide a layer of sort of obfuscation that the law enforcement community members would be, I know we touched on that earlier, would be interested in, so they don't run into issues with their department. I didn't know if either of you had proactively in your respective, or even you, Pat, in terms of your position in outreach, gone out to law enforcement agencies, I know not all of them are veterans, but a lot of them are. And those that are vets would have the dual-pronged burden of having their issues from their time in service as well as from their law enforcement career. but I didn't know if you how much outreach, if any, you're doing with the law enforcement community to make them aware of your services, especially the vet center, where they may be able to do that without it raising too many eyebrows. Thank you.
I don't know, is this on? You guys hear me? Okay. It's a great question. I think one of the things I just wanted to make a comment in regard to your question is that there is very, very close similarity in regard to stigma as it relates to reaching out for help among the veteran and law enforcement community. And, as such, I'm drawing from experience as a clinician working with an active duty police officer who was terrified to engage in care because he knew it was in all likelihood going to result in him being taken off the street and losing his job track that he was on. And I couldn't look at him in the eye and not on some level agree with that because of the current system that's in place. We know that if somebody's suicidal, it's kind of hard to send them off on duty with a gun in their holster, right? So these are challenging and difficult circumstances to navigate. So I just want to say that on the front end. I will say, to answer your question directly, I have definitely engaged law enforcement. I look at law enforcement as being oftentimes the first and many times the only line of defense against somebody who's actively suicidal. So their work is both invaluable and also necessary to help prevent suicides at certain stages. I know, like in Atlantic County, the Atlantic County Sheriff's Department has been active in our coalition's work. As a matter of fact, they are going to be a pilot for one of the programs that we're implementing in terms of identifying service members and doing monthly check-ins. So I think your question is one, both out of curiosity and also to prompt us to make sure that we're doing that. So I applaud the question and making sure that we are engaging in those areas. I know on a personal level as well, I think it was just 2 weeks ago that Jen actually called me and shared with me that there was law enforcement officers in a neighboring town and community that were interested in getting some training. I can't speak for Pat and Jackie because they speak for themselves very well, but I will say that I know they've been extremely active with the Levitt training, law enforcement trainings.
Law enforcement veteran engagement training.
Law enforcement veteran engagement trainings, and we've had packed houses. One of the first times we did it, I'll be honest, I thought maybe we'd have, a couple guys who got in trouble and were forced to come. I didn't know. I didn't think anybody would show up, but we had a packed house. So that told me that our law enforcement is well aware of this issue, that they're very embedded with this issue, and that they want to get some solutions and be a part of the solution. So first of all, I thank you to our law enforcement, and I also wholeheartedly agree that involving them is crucial to the work.
And if we have before we get to any other questions, I would like to introduce the gentleman that's sitting at the far right end of the table. That is Patrick Carney. Pat was a staff sergeant in the United States Army. He did 2 tours in Iraq, one in 2008 and 9, and then again in 2011. Pat's transition out of the Army was something that he learned a lot about and has since then tried to create sort of a reverse basic training where veterans then learn how to transition out but then get back into society. So getting jobs, getting to school, all those things that Pat did on his own, getting his bachelor's degree in psychology, joining the Student Veterans Organization, getting involved in all different veterans organizations, especially those that involved athletic therapy, athletic rehabilitation. His work is what connected him to being a part of KOVA and a part of the Coalition Against Veteran Suicide, which is also known as CAVS. We didn't give Pat a chance to really talk about that. So if you could, please give a little bit of chit-chat about the CAVS.
Sure. So in Matt's new position, being the CEPC Community Engagement Partnerships Coordinator, sorry. One of Matt's taskings was to start coalitions, obviously, and I know you talked about that earlier, Matt. My first thought was, well, what about veterans like myself, like Jeff, like Ryan, like Dave, who are vets, but they're in the workforce, who are, for lack of a better word, forgotten because it's assumed that we are doing fine because we have a job, we have a roof over our head, and all those things. None of those things make it so we're not fighting demons from our time in service. None of them. Just because I have a job, just because my family's doing fantastic. Yes, all my daily life stressors, for the most part, are pretty easy to iron out. But there's still things that linger from service. So how do we take care of those service members to make sure they continue to be successful? And that also would fall under the LEOs, law enforcement officers, as well, because they are the same working veterans. And especially for them, and especially, service members that are maybe working in hospitals as well. I mean, they're all seeing kind of the first responders, all of them are seeing the similar kind of things that they may have seen overseas. And that's kind of what KAVS, Atlantic Cape Coalition Against Veteran Suicide. Dave Brimmer, don't say a word about my acronym. I don't know where they come from. They just come to me. So I was infantry in the military. Dave was cavalry. So having a coalition named after the CAV is always good. Is always nice. So it's having that focus. I think is going to be extremely beneficial, and I think it'll lead to more veterans getting connected with services. Because all those veterans who are working, who are doing well, I figure are part of something. Like myself, like any veteran who's here today, they're here talking and they're here listening about what's going on. So then they take that back to wherever they're going, to their communities, to their fathers, to their mothers, whoever served in their families, and then they get connected, and so on and so forth. Being able to do that, having this pilot program perform monthly checks like the Army did, post preventative maintenance checks and services, getting that going, and between Atlantic County Sheriffs and the Atlantic Care, I guess now, which is fantastic because that's 5,000 employees, 17 locations, getting all their veterans together and making sure they're doing well. So it's moving forward quickly, I couldn't agree more with you, Rhonda, about not having to deal with the bureaucracy. It is fantastic not having to do that. So it's things are looking good for New Jersey, and I really hope we see some success down in South Jersey here, or Atlantic and Cape May County, so then we can bring it to everyone else.
Anybody have any questions before I move on? Would you like to add anything? Is there anything you'd like to add in before we go? Before we're done? Yeah.
Sure. So, yeah, there is one more thing that I'd just like to add, just like I talk about briefly. There is a newer initiative that is starting to take hold. The program is called ETS sponsorship. It's been mentioned a couple times while we've been here today, and I think it really speaks to what has been missing for many generations now of people leaving the military. It is a program run by a gentleman named Dr. Joe Geraci. He works for us at the VA. He works out of the Bronx. And he is a phenomenal clinician and a phenomenal program manager. He has taken that program from non-existent to the standard in just a short few months. So what the program aims to do is link service members as they leave the service, right, as they ETS from the military, with veteran mentors, sponsors. So instead of just getting out of the military perhaps as you did in Vietnam or World War II or Korea, whatever those, and they just said, hey, you know, thanks for your service, adios, if they did that. You know, these days, there's kind of a knee-jerk reaction, and we get kind of the opposite of that, right? So you get a bag full of pamphlets and a world of opportunities to you, and then people get so overwhelmed and all they want to do is go and hug their family, and that bag of pamphlets ends up in a drawer and it's never seen again. So what ETS sponsorship aims to do is link a service member up with a veteran who can help them navigate that very, very critical time of readjustment, right, back to civilian life. Whatever those resources might be that they don't know how to access or they don't know that are there to access, they can be that conduit to make sure that that service member, now new veteran, is successful in that transition, because we know that you know, veterans who are successful, you know, whatever that really means, veterans who are successful in that transition go on to be much happier, more productive members of society, right? So that's what we want, you know. So the other part of that is that these people are, these service members turned veterans are encouraged to enroll right out of the gate into VA healthcare, right? So you heard Mr. Luby say it before, you've heard Jackie say it, you know, and now you're going to hear me say it too. And it's not just because I work at VA, right. It's the way that this works, right? So we need people to be enrolled in the system and to use the system, or the system will fail to be there in the future. That's the bottom line, right? Because that's Civics 101. If there are no users for the system, the money to sustain the system starts to go away. That's Civics 101, right? So getting these new service members involved with VA brings them into the fold, gives them immediate access to VA resources, not just healthcare, right? But healthcare, disability benefits, better access to their education benefits, access to things like housing, things like jobs, things like vocational rehabilitation, all of this sorts of stuff, right? The things that we know that we do really well, and that veteran, that newly made veteran, that newly forged veteran, you know, can find out with us, right? And so every veteran that gets enrolled in the VA healthcare system becomes one more person that can say, hey, VA does this really well, why don't you join it? Or say, hey, VA needs to make a little bit more progress there, let me be that voice and say, hey, we can make that progress there, right? Because we're looking for that feedback for sure, right? Perhaps in the past we weren't as focused on getting that sort of feedback, but we are definitely focused on getting that feedback from veterans, from users, because we're here to make sure when I say we, I'm talking about the people who work at VA that are on this stage, right, are here to make sure that the VA that exists now is going to be well into the future, and it's going to be the best VA that this country can possibly give to veterans like us. So that's what ETS sponsorship aims to do. So it's a really good program. If you want to be a sponsor, by the way, if you'd like to be a sponsor,
what a radio voice.
I know, that's my radio voice, hint, hint. If you'd like to be a sponsor, come up and talk to Jackie, and she will tell you, no, I'm kidding, Pat, myself, any of us can tell you how to be a sponsor in the ETS sponsorship program. It does not take a lot for you to be a sponsor. You do have to go through a little bit of training just so you get oriented to how the program works, but aside from that, you're doing mentorship, which is something that if you've had any sort of leadership responsibility in the military is something you already know how to do. So.
And
Thanks.
there are multiple sponsors on this stage, so we'd be happy to really tell you in depth more about it. Ryan, anything you'd like to add? Oh, sorry, Pat.
It's important to mention too with ECS sponsorship, anyone who's here that lives in South Jersey and interested in being a sponsor, please please come up and talk to me afterwards here. Also, you do not have to be a veteran to be a sponsor. You can be a civilian and still have veterans that come out and sponsor. Just want to make sure I mentioned that as well.
Ryan, anything to add? Is this thing on?
Oh, I don't have to hold it. Oh, sorry about that. Just a quick note about military and law enforcement. There's a special project I was working on the side that has been growing more steadily attention, specifically in the last 3 years, plus the COVID blip, and all that stuff, is education and benefits and compensation with disabilities. A lot of law enforcement officers kind of think outside of the VA, that as if they don't need those resources or they don't want to utilize those resources. Specifically in the field of higher education, I've found in Ocean County that there's a lot of dual military law enforcement officers that don't use their education benefits. It's something that is real and dear to me, but it's one of those training parameters that I think is an opportunity to educate it collectively. You did your time, you served, and you deserve every single benefit that is provided by this country, whether it's community civic or federal service. It doesn't matter. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And in closing, Mr. Carney, if you'd like to take it away.
I just want to thank everyone for coming. I know this air conditioning has been amazing all day. I mean, at least for me, personally. Spent 4 years in Alaska while in the military, and I don't think my DNA ever switched back to New Jersey. So I love the cold. So I've been happy all day, honestly. Everyone else, I know you're freezing, and I apologize, but this feels great. But yes, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Brookdale, for hosting us. Thank you to all our vendors that came out, and safe travels, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.